Hi and welcome. In this podcast, I'm going to talk about South Korean film Oldboy, directed by Park Chan-wook and released in 2003. The film is often remembered for being shocking and disturbing, but it has also widely recognized as a major turning point in how South Korean cinema was received internationally. Rather than focusing only on the plot, I will look at Oldboy from a screen history perspective, including audience reaction, critical responses, its impact on the Korean film industry, and its position within Park Chan-wook's career. I shall also briefly compare it with Spike Lee's American remake to highlight how cultural context shapes meaning. When Oldboy was released in South Korea, audience reactions were strong and often divided. Many viewers described the film as emotionally overwhelming, particularly because of its violent imagery and controversial ending. At the same time, Korean critics praised the film for being breaking away from traditional genre storytelling. Several reviews at the time highlighted how the film combined revenge thriller elements with psychological depth, making it more unsettling than entertaining. The performance of Choi Min-sik as Oh Dae-soo was especially praised, with critics noting his physical commitment and emotional intensity. Despite the discomfort it caused, Oldboy was also commercially successful, which demonstrated Korean audiences were willing to engage with films that challenged moral comfort and narrative expectations. Oldboy was released during a period of rapid change in South Korean society and cinema. The country was still dealing with the effects of the 1997 Asian financial crisis, which had reshaped everyday life and economic stability. The film includes brief reference to real historical moments such as the financial crisis and the 2002 World Cup. These details ground the film in a specific historical moment and reflect a society experiencing instability, recovery, and emotional tension. This context helps explain why the film's theme of loss, anger, and obsession resonated so strongly with local audience. Internationally, Oldboy gained attention after its screening at Cannes Film Festival in 2004. Critics at Cannes described the film as both brutal and formally controlled. Some reviewers praised its originality, while others focused on how emotionally the film felt to watch. Rather than being dismissed as violence for shock value, Oldboy was often described as a film that used violence to explore guilt, memory, and moral responsibility. Its Grand Prix win at Cannes was widely reported as a breakthrough moment for South Korean cinema. Following its success at Cannes, Oldboy had a noticeable impact on the South Korean film industry. Young Joo-soo, a Korean sales agent who handled the film's international distribution, later described the film's success as seismic for the industry. She explained that after Oldboy, international distributor and financier began actively approaching South Korea for films rather than the other way around. Remake offers, international sales deals, and festival invitation increased significantly. This shift helped Korean filmmakers gain greater access to global markets and funding opportunities. While Oldboy was not the only important film of this period, its visibility played a key role in changing industry confidence. But Oldboy's impact wasn't just industrial or international, it also needs to be understood as a part of wider movement happening in South Korean cinema at the time. To place Oldboy more clearly within screen history, it's also useful to think about it as part of the Korean New Wave. The Korean New Wave refers to a period from the late 1990s into the early 2000s when South Korean cinema began gaining strong international recognition. During this time, directors such as Park Chan-wook and Bong Joon-ho were making films that combined popular genres with social, political, and psychological themes. Films like Memories of Murder, released in the same period, so that Korean cinema could be both locally grounded and globally resonant. Oldboy fits directly into this movement. While it tells a highly personal story of revenge, it also reflects broader feelings of anger, trauma, and instability present in South Korean society at the time. What makes Oldboy stand out within the Korean New Wave is how far it pushes emotional and moral discomfort. Rather than offering social critique in a realistic way, the film uses extreme stylization and physical intensity. This approach helped distinguish Oldboy internationally and made it one of the most visible examples of Korean cinema during this period. As a result, Oldboy is often remembered as one of the films that helped define this era for a global audience. Park Chang-wook has explained that he wanted Oldboy to be experienced physically, not just emotionally. He stated that his goal was for audience to feel exhausted by the end of the film. This intention is reflected in the way violence is staged and filmed. Rather than using fast editing or stylized action, Park often holds shots for long periods, forcing viewers to sit with discomfort. The corridor fight scene is one of the most frequently discussed examples of this approach. Filmed in single side on long take, the scene avoids spectacle and instead emphasizes physical exhaustion. Critics have pointed out that the scene feels deliberately anti heroic, showing violence as clumsy and painful rather than impressive. Throughout the film, viewers are encouraged to empathize with Odesu and support his quest for revenge. When the final truth is revealed, that sympathy becomes morally troubling. This shift forces audience to confront their own emotional involvement, which many critics identify as the film's most disturbing achievement. To understand why Oldboy is so often used as a reference point, it's important to look at Park Chan-wook's wider filmography. Before Oldboy, he explored similar themes in Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, which presents revenge as cold, bleak, and emotionally distant. Oldboy expands these ideas with greater psychological intensity and narrative shock. It sits at the center of Park's so-called Vengeance trilogy, alongside Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance and Lady Vengeance. Later films such as Thirst and The Handmaiden show a more refined visual style and a shift toward desire and manipulation rather than pure revenge. However, these films are frequently compared back to Oldboy because Oldboy represents the moment when Park's work reached a global audience. As a result, it has become a benchmark against which his later films are judged. In 2013, Oldboy was remade by American director Spike Lee. Although the remake follows the same basic storyline, it received a far less enthusiastic response. Many critics argued that the Hollywood version explained too much and softened the emotional impact of the original. This comparison highlights how Oldboy is deeply shaped by its cultural and industrial context and why its effect is difficult to reproduce elsewhere. Another important way to understand Oldboy is through its status as an adaptation. The film is based on a Japanese manga, but Park Chan-wook significantly reshaped the original material. Rather than closely following the source, he transformed it into a psychological revenge tragedy rooted in South Korean's cultural and emotional context. This process highlights Park's role as an author, showing how he imposes his own themes of guilt, obsession, and moral consequences onto existing material. The later American remake further emphasizes this point. While Spike Lee's version follows the same narrative outline, it lacks the ambiguity and restraint that define Park's film. From a screen history perspective, this comparison demonstrates how authorship and cultural context shapes meaning, and why Park Chan-wook's Oldboy remains the more influential adaptation. To conclude, Oldboy is important not simply because it is shocking. Its real significance lies in its reception, its international breakthrough, and its lasting industry impact. The film reflects a key moment in South Korean cinema when local storytelling gained global visibility. Through strong audience reactions, critical recognition at Cannes, and changes in international distribution, Oldboy helped reshape how Korean cinema was understood worldwide. For these reasons, Oldboy remains a central text in screen history and a defining work in Park Chan-wook's career. Thank you for your time. The podcast ends here.